It was the end of 2007. I had recently wrapped up Christmas and was all set for my second semester in grade 10. I lived in Guelph, Ontario back then. It used to be an average city surrounded by a decent amount of country roads. I returned to school and was immediately greeted by Salina, my best friend at the time. We caught up, and with much excitement, she broke the news to me that she was dating someone, a new kid at our school. Salina and I knew each other since grade 6. I had seen her highs and lows through the years. We would keep each other in the loop about everything: our family issues, fights with parents, our grades, breakups, makeups, good days, bad days, and everything in between. For a while, we just lived a block away, so we'd walk back home from school and end up hanging out at her building's staircase to talk about our days. Those conversations would last hours. However, lately she wasn't having a good run. The guy she was dating before holidays was long distance, and I mean truly long distance. He was at the other end of the planet. She was a hopeless romantic, but even she knew it was a dead end. So, the fact she found someone who went to our school was a real good news. I was happy for her, and it felt like things would finally align within her romantic life. The next day, she introduced me to her new boyfriend. His name was Kevin. It was a brief meeting during lunchtime, but he seemed like a good guy. He was funny, upbeat, and charismatic. They looked good together, and even though they were together for barely a month, their vibe was well synced. As days went by, I'd be walking back home by myself, and I started to hear less and less from Salina. It didn't bother me, though. She was happy and in love, and we all know how big of a deal that is during our teenage. I respected her boundaries. On a Friday night in early March of 2008, my parents were out of town for the weekend. I was home alone playing video games and living my best life. It was around 10:45 p.m. and my home phone rang. I picked up, and it was Salina and Kevin on the other side. "Hey guys, what's happening?" I asked, confused. They never called me at this hour. No one called me at this hour. Kevin responded, "I've got my dad's car for the night, and we are going for a late-night drive. Care to join?" I found that to be a bit odd and thought he was joking. I confirmed with Salina, and she confirmed that they were serious about the spontaneous late-night trip and wanted me to be a part of it. I thought about it, had nothing better to do, so I took up on the offer. I waited in the lobby of my apartment building. They arrived by 11:15. It was a white minivan. It looked pretty worn out, but in that moment I didn't make anything of it. I tried to hop into the back seat, but Salina quickly got off the passenger seat and offered me to sit there, and she sat in the back seat instead. It happened so quickly, I went with it. We played loud music. He drove semi-recklessly, but it was all about fun at that age. I never even asked him if he had a valid license to drive. Thinking back, I don't think he did. 20 minutes into the drive, he took a random left turn on a country road. I lived in Guelph for a good chunk of my life, but never really came across this road or this area altogether. I asked him, "Do you know where you are going?" He replied, "Oh yeah, me and Salina drive around here all the time." I turned back to look at Salina to confirm, and she did not respond. At that time, not every teenager had a cell phone or a GPS, and we were those teenagers. If we got lost, there would be no way to find our way back. "It's late, man. We shouldn't drive out this far," I said firmly. He laughed and didn't seem to care. At that point, he came across slightly disconnected and detached from how I was feeling, and how his girlfriend was feeling as she was not saying a word. About 15 minutes later, still driving on that road, it got really dark. There were no lights or sign of any civilization in sight. The moon was shining bright, and that was the only source of illumination. Finally, Salina spoke up and said, "Kevin, we have never driven out this far. Let's go back, please. It's past midnight." However, Kevin was adamant and kept telling us he knows where he's going. Another 10 minutes went by. We were deep in the nowhere, surrounded by thick woods, and the roads turned into gravel. That is when he finally pulled over to the side and said, "This is it." "This is what, Kevin?" I asked confusedly. "You will see," he responded, and right after that, he turned off the ignition, took the keys, jumped off the minivan, and stood about 10 feet away from it, facing the front of the vehicle. He just stared at us without saying a word. The headlights were off. We could barely see him. The only visual we had of him was due to the moonlight. I asked Salina what is happening right now. She looked as shocked and confused as me. She had no idea and was horrified by what was taking place. I figured it would be a good idea to get out of the vehicle and confront him. I ran that by Salina, and she agreed. Salina and I exited the vehicle at the same time. We both shut our doors, and she walked ahead of me trying to talk to him. But in that very moment, he used his remote key to lock the doors of the minivan and quickly ran off into the woods. Salina and I were shocked to the point that our bodies froze. She looked at me and I ran back to the minivan trying to open it, but to no avail. It was locked.
Is he pranking us?
I screamed. It took us a moment to realize that we were in the middle of nowhere, past midnight, with no phones or means to call for help. It was March, so winter hadn't fully left us yet. I got into survival mode and wanted to make sure we get back in the van as the cold temperature would not show mercy. Salina, however, was worried and wanted us to look for Kevin. We were surrounded by coyotes and it was by no means a safe place to be around. Still, I had absolutely zero urge to find Kevin. I wanted to find help and get her and myself home. Me and Salina ran up and down the road to look for a house, a farmhouse, anything exhibiting human life. We found nothing. No one. Soon after that, we looked in the direction Kevin had vanished into, and there was some illumination. It was definitely not the moonlight. Someone had set up a fire. Salina was thrilled and relieved. She thought it was all a joke and Kevin simply wanted to surprise us with some sort of a camping situation. She looked at me and said,
"There we go. It all makes sense now."
I looked at her, not affirming her conclusion. I was not having it. Something felt awfully wrong here. She ran towards the fire that was lit about 25 meters away. I couldn't leave her behind and there was nowhere to go anyways, so I ran after her. To be honest, I was sort of curious to find out what was happening. I got there probably half a second after Salina and I found Kevin, now dressed differently and surrounded by tools and supplies he certainly did not carry when he ran off. I started to put it together. Kevin had been here before, and this was all a setup. At this point, I was certain something horrible was about to happen. I slowly walked towards Salina, who was about 10 feet away from me. I wanted to hold her and tell her to run back. Kevin saw my movement and lunged at me. Salina stood there motionless, not knowing what to do. He overpowered me, but soon I gained control of the situation. Kevin had no way of knowing what my father did. He never really cared. That worked out because my father was a police officer for 20 years, and he had spent years teaching me how to tackle such situations. I managed to put Kevin in a headlock, but he would not give up. I started to feel he wanted to get away from me and attack Salina. He was angry and awfully resentful towards her. At a point, I had to hold him back from hurting her. I screamed her name and said, "Run!" She ran back towards the road, and I was left with no other option but to seriously hurt Kevin, so he stops. I pinned him down, grabbed one of his tools nearby that looked like a decent-sized flashlight and smashed it on his left knee several times. I did not stop till I was sure it is shattered. Once I was certain he could not chase me, I got off him and tried to find the keys to the minivan. I couldn't. I had an epiphany. I ran back to the minivan with that flashlight. I started to shatter its windows and breaking into it. That resulted in the most unpleasant, ugly alarm that came out of that minivan. It went on for a while, and thankfully, someone who lived a few hundred meters away heard it and decided to investigate. He drove to us, and I told him what had happened and begged him to call the police. Once the police arrived, we were asked to give statements, but we were in no shape to do so. They escorted us home. Paramedics took care of Kevin. Weeks later, we found out that Kevin absolutely was not the sweet, charming, upbeat guy we all thought he was. That was just a facade. In reality, he was jealous, manic, deeply insecure, and violent. Turns out, Salina had a male friend in her science lab she would hang out with for assignments and group projects. And that did not sit well with Kevin. He confronted her, but she didn't listen, and clearly told him that he cannot control her social life. It aggravated him even more. Not only he wanted to hurt her, but he also wanted to hurt every man in her life, including me. I don't know why he went to such extent that night. I don't know what he was planning to do. Whatever it was, one wrong move, one missed second, one ignored opportunity would have resulted in something awful. Now we are in our 30s. Salina and I are friends still, and we see each other from time to time. She never brings him up or what happened that night. It took her years of therapy to get over it. Not sure if she's still fully over it. In my case, I know where he lives. I know what he does. I know everything about him. I have no urge to go see him, but it's good to have that knowledge because one wrong move, one missed second, one ignored opportunity could result in something awful.